support the Webb amendment on troop readiness. The distinguished junior senator from Virginia has taken, once again, an important leadership role on an issue that is as important to our country and to our military and their families as any one issue. And that is readiness. Because, Mr. President, it is the men and women who we ask to fight and die for this country that must always be our highest priority. And the men and women who serve this country in uniform and their families deserve a policy worthy of their sacrifices. And so I appreciate very much my friend from Virginia's leadership on this issue. This is part of an amendment that Senator Webb and I had introduced a couple of months ago. Mr. President, in February of this year, General Peter Pace, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, reported to Congress that there is now in his words, significant risk that our military will not be able to respond to an emergency crisis in another part of the world. End of General Pace's quote. Since that time, the United States has sent more of our soldiers and more of our military equipment to Iraq. The war in Iraq has pushed the United States military to the breaking point. I, like most of my colleagues, have been told by military leaders, both on active duty and those who are retired, that we are doing tremendous damage to our Army and to our Marine Corps, as well as our Army National Guard. Our troops are being deployed longer than they should be, more frequently than they should be, and without full training and equipment. We are eroding our military power at a time when our country faces an increasing arc of challenges and threats across the globe. We are abusing our all-voluntary force in a dangerous and irresponsible way. Senator Webb recited a number of the facts. Facts, not interpretations, not subjective analysis, but facts as to what is happening to our military today because of the burden that we are placing on our military in Iraq. Our fifth year in Iraq. Our sixth year in Afghanistan. This amendment goes to the heart of ensuring the readiness of our military and the time between deployments. This amendment will ensure that all active units that have deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan have time at home that is at least equal to the length of the previous deployment. Now, if we can't commit at least that to our forces, then what can we commit to? For the National Guard or Reserves, our amendment establishes a minimum 3 years between deployments. Longer and more predictable dwell time will allow soldiers to rest, re-equip, retrain, and return to their families. Our amendment has waiver authority because there can be extraordinary circumstances that require extraordinary use of our military. And we have used that over and over and over in Iraq. Today, Mr. President, in our fifth year in Iraq, in the middle of a civil war in Iraq, we must return to the standards that allowed us to create the finest military force that the world has ever known. The best led, the best educated, the best trained, the best equipped, and the most committed military the world has ever known. You can't make those kinds of militaries, you can't build those kinds of militaries overnight, or even over 5 years. it took some of this country's greatest military leaders, post-World War II, more importantly, post-Vietnam, like General Powell, General Schwarzkopf, and many others, to commit their lives, 35 years of their lives, to rebuild a broken military after we broke it in Vietnam. We are headed in the same direction, Mr. President, unless we get control of this disaster now. Nothing is more important to our country, to our society, than our people. So, Mr. President, I urge my colleagues to support this important amendment, and I appreciate the leadership of the junior senator from Virginia who knows something about the military, who knows something about war. Mr. President, I thank you, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I would just like to take a moment and express my appreciation to the senator from Nebraska for his leadership on this issue and his support for this amendment. And it's my firm hope that people on the other side of the aisle will understand this amendment for what it is, and people who, no matter what their views of the propriety of the war in Iraq or the direction of the president's strategy, will understand that this is a minimum bottom line in terms of how the United States military is used around the world. And for the record, I would like to point out that Senator Hagel and I, to my knowledge, are the only veterans of ground combat in Vietnam in this body, and it is a privilege and a pleasure to have him with me on this amendment. And I yield the floor.
Senator from Florida. Mr. President, I would just commend Senator Hagel and Senator Webb. I was serving as a lieutenant and a captain in the United States Army during Vietnam. I was not sent to Vietnam, but clearly dealt with all of its aftermath and the duties that I did carry in the military. And I support Senator Webb's amendment and appreciate his statement and Senator Hagel's very heartfelt statement about Senator Webb's amendment. Mr. President, earlier Senator Hagel had joined me in being the original co-sponsor of an amendment that the two of us will be offering later on, having to do with widows and orphans. Senator Hagel is a longtime supporter of the effort to repeal this offset to the survivor's benefit plan by the Dependents Indemnity